Are you a parent that is worried that you are messing up your child? Do you ever fear that one day your child will be sitting in therapy unpacking their childhood and you'll be part of the story? Part of the process in therapy is spent on having a client unpack their childhood and relationship with their parents that may have caused damage, whether intentionally by the parent or not intentionally. Then you have kids of your own and you may worry, am I doing a better job than my parent, or will I do the same thing? If you're a little self-aware, you may now actually care, but be stuck on what it is that I can actually do differently. There are 7 things I think parents can do to make sure that they do not unintentionally raise kids who lack self-esteem, self-respect, resilience, and hate themselves. Let me explain. Welcome everybody to the Ease Your Mind podcast. My name is Christina Adrian. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, licensed professional counselor, and I help you break free from anxiety, fear, and shame by teaching you powerful tools rooted in scripture and psychology, healing minds, restoring faith, and renewing purpose. So there are certain things that I have learned, and this is from a therapist's point of view, from my work in doing therapy for many years. There are certain types of behaviors that I see or read about or hear from parents that typically lead a child to have struggle with self-esteem, to have struggle with self-love and shame. So I want to do the opposite though and show what you can do instead to help build self-esteem in your child, to build resilience in ways, because sometimes parents can unintentionally harm their children. They're not purposely trying to make the child feel isolated and alone, but however, different stresses of life can sometimes get in the way or cause reactions towards a child that then may inevitably cause these types of feelings. So the first one that I want to go through is learn to give constructive criticism. Keyword is constructive. Many people are struggling because the criticisms that they've heard when they were a child. Now, it might not only be from the parent, it could be from their peers and other family members. But know that as a parent, your criticism will eventually become their inner voice and thoughts. So if you are calling your child stupid or saying, what is wrong with you? Why are you failing? Why are you making all these mistakes? What your child hears is, I am a failure, I am inadequate, and then they will grow up ashamed and hate themselves and then behave accordingly. It's important for us to learn as parents to give constructive criticism. Can I see your exam? Can we go over to see what went wrong? And maybe I can find you help. If I can't help you, I'll tell your child, I'll find you a tutor to see what can help. This doesn't make you a failure. Speak life into them. This doesn't make you a failure. You're just making a mistake. You just made a mistake. Because one of the struggles that we have, and this happens in adulthood, is what's called cognitive diffusion, being able to separate what happened to how we, our emotions attached to it and how we identify ourselves to it. Because me failing a test is a fact, but me thinking I'm stupid because I failed a test is subjective. That's the identity and the meaning that I put behind this situation that happened, but I don't have to do that. But however, if a child doesn't learn how to make that separation, they're going to grow up thinking every time they make a mistake, this means I'm stupid, rather than seeing like, no, that's just a mistake, and then being able to learn from it. It's important for us to learn how to give constructive criticism and how we help our children, because they're going to make a lot of mistakes. We still make mistakes as adults. So they're very new to life. So they're going to make a lot of mistakes. So we have to be mindful of how it is that we are criticizing them and helping to build them up so that they can become better, but also have a better relationship with failure and mistake, so that they don't see it as a moral failing or an attack on their identity. They just see it as an opportunity to learn and to grow, which is the way we should see mistakes and failures. But unfortunately, many of us do not, because we never learned how to. Some people can interact with their children in not a harsh way, but in a way where that can sound like being harsh. But because of the type of parent and child relationship, the child may not actually take it that way. They might actually take it in a different way. So this is all depending on also knowing the temperaments of your children, which I guess is one of the other things I think is important too, for parents to understand their child's temperament, and knowing that, especially if you have multiple children, most likely your children have different temperaments. So you cannot treat them the same way. Some people say you have to treat all your kids the same, but no, you got to love your kids all the same, but you shouldn't treat all of them the same. Sometimes some kids, for example, might need a little bit more emotional support because of the temperament that they have. Maybe they have a more sensitive temperament. And instead of being made to feel like they're a problem or their sensitivity is an issue, they might just need a little bit more support. with their sensitivity and knowing that this temperament of them is not all bad and that it could be some good that comes out of it. So I do think that that it is actually important to understand your child, each and every one of them, their temperaments, their personalities, so that you can know how to react and speak to each of them. Now, I am fully aware that that sounds like a lot of work. So especially if you have multiple children, that's a lot of personalities and temperaments that you got to deal with. However, I would say there are some things that do go across the board. So it's not like it has to be drastically different with each child, because at the end of the day, everybody should receive and also give constructive criticism. Just in general, that's a basic rule of humanity, that your criticism shouldn't be to put down. It should be to help build up. So that's something, for example, that will go across the board, whether you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 children. However, there are certain things about their personality that I do think is important to understand and pay attention to when you are interacting with them. Also, remember to talk to your child the way that you wish your parents did. And this goes to point number 2. Many times we forget what it was like to be a child, and we have parents who probably did the same thing to us, and then we do the same thing to our children. And it's important for us to try to remember what it was like to be a child. For some, it is hard, especially if you're one who ignored and suppressed your emotions throughout your childhood. It might be hard for you to understand and remember what it was like to be a child. This is one of the things that I often taught myself to do, because I remember when I was a child, I often remember having conversations or just even feeling as a child, like, why are these adults acting like they've never been children before? Whenever I would speak about something or another child, they would act like as if they'd never been a kid before. And then I realized, oh, people do forget. And I realized, without doing this on purpose, I kept telling myself, I don't want to be an adult that forget what it's like to be a kid. I don't want to be an adult that forget what it's like to be a kid. And in some ways, I think this has helped me, because when I do talk to kids, or if I do work with children, which I don't work with children often, but I used to when I used to be a youth minister, many times I try to understand where they're at. That a 15-year-old going through what a 15-year-old is going through is big for a 15-year-old. Just like a 30-year-old going through what a 30-year-old is going through is big for a 30-year-old. Your child also doesn't understand your problems. Like, they might think your problems are small, and that you would be upset if their kid thought that. You would think that's not fair, but we do the same thing to kids. But these are their issues. And I used to always train myself with that and know that childhood is a very hard place to be in. What's blocking your inner peace? Are you not sure why you feel stuck, overwhelmed, or disconnected? Do you have thoughts constantly running through your mind and ruminating and causing a lot of anxiety? Are you lacking peace in your mind, emotions, not understanding who you are, and struggling to understand the purpose in your life and who God called you to be? I created a quiz to help reveal the root cause, to understand what it is that needs to be dealt with. Is it coming from the mind and the way you're thinking? Is it coming from your heart and your emotions? Is it a soul issue, or is it a spirit issue? This can help you to understand exactly where you need to begin your healing journey. Click the link below to take the quiz to start to see where your healing journey needs to begin. Now back to the show. I'm not part of the whole, social media. All the time I see people saying that they want to go back to childhood. Adulthood is the worst hood ever. I do not share that point of view. I love being adult. Too many people out there are adulting wrong, probably because they didn't. Well, I'm not going to get into that. Too many people are adulting wrong. I am not trying to go back to childhood. Childhood, you also have no autonomy. So you don't really have much control over a lot of things. That's another reason why I don't think childhood is better than adulthood. You don't know how to deal with your emotions. Sometimes, yes, as an adult, you don't either, because if you don't learn it as a kid, of course, you're not going to learn as an adult. But at least as an adult, you start to have a little bit more agency and autonomy to say, okay, let me learn how to do this, even if somebody didn't teach me it when I was a child. Because there were many things that unfortunately I didn't learn, but I did learn it as I was growing older, either through the Holy Spirit parenting me and teaching me it, or because I have autonomy now to go and get the education somewhere else, I was able to get that education. And no fault to sometimes our parents, they can't teach us everything. However, when you're a child, your thoughts are limited, your wisdom is limited. I find adulthood to be much better. This is the thing that I often hear a lot of parents say to kids, or even just adults in general say to kids. When kids are complaining or sad about their life, a lot of parents say, what you so sad about? You ain't got no bills to pay. What you so upset about? Your child might be covering up and not even talking about a sexual abuse they're going through. But because you're talking that way, you don't create a safe space for them to even talk about it, because you're assuming that their problems must be smaller than yours. However, if you remember your childhood, because a lot of times abuse does carry on, it's like as if, well, you remember you was abused as a kid. How do you not even consider that maybe if my child is really going through this pain or acting out the way they're acting out, maybe they are going through some type of abuse that I don't know either. So this is one of the issues that I find in adults is we forget what it's like to be kids, and then we don't know how to show empathy towards our kids because we assume that their problems are not that big because we're just so overly consumed with our problems. But however, if you keep yourself in the mindset of trying to understand your kid and understand their world, I think this is also allow you to approach them in a way that allows a safe space for them to speak, that will allow you to treat them better, treat and talk to your child the way that you wanted to be treated as a child, instead of the way that maybe you were treated that you didn't like. I know this isn't easy, and I know kids will test and try you. So I'm not even also minimizing that. However, most of us just repeat the negative maybe behaviors or the negative ways that our parents spoke to us onto our children, which leads also to point number 3. Many parents need boundaries, and so that they can learn how to teach their kids boundaries. Now, when I say need boundaries, I would say it's more about how you implement the boundaries. Sometimes kids, I think, can be overwhelming, especially when you have many children, and it can cause some types of reactions. So then it's like, how do I create these boundaries without making my kid maybe feel isolated? And when you practice boundary, though, it's important because then you're showing your child how to also create boundaries for themselves. So when you have many children and you might feel overstimulated by many of the children, tell your child, you need some time to yourself. This does not mean that you do not want to be with them because children do personalize. And that's one of the issues. When you say that you want to be alone, they internalize that as you don't want to be around them. So you have to make it very clear to them and let them know that this doesn't mean I don't want to be around you. I just need some time alone. Reaffirming them that you do love them, but sometimes you need time to yourself, and that should be okay. And maybe find something in their world that you could connect it to. And maybe say, for example, you could say, well, remember when you were angry, you told me you wanted to sit alone for a few minutes and you just needed a second, and I left you and respected that moment you needed? It's like that. I respected it because I love you and I know that that's what you needed. And right now, mommy and daddy need some time to themselves because I'm feeling sad or tired, whatever it might be. So I just need a moment to myself, and then I will come back to you when I can, or I will let you know when I can have this conversation with you, because maybe it's a conversation they want to have, but you cannot or do not feel ready to have it right now. Tell them I need a moment. I will come back and have this conversation with you later. And I think it's also okay and appropriate to tell your child how you're feeling. Mommy's feeling sad right now. I just need a minute. Because then that's also showing your child how to express their emotion and how to communicate. Because your children will always pick up what you do. And one of the other things that I often used to hear that makes no sense is do as I say, not as I do. That's just not how life works. Children will pick up what you do more than what you say. Because behavior is a language, and behavior speaks louder many times than your words. And it's usually more consistent. That's another reason why your child will pick up your behavior more than your words. So I think it's important to communicate your boundaries. This will then teach your child to do the same and show them how to not people please and respect themselves and care for their own needs, so that now when they're in relationship with others, they would have learned how to tell their partner, hey, I need a moment right now. I'm overstimulated by this conversation. Can I take a break and come back to you later? So by you putting boundaries with your children, if they're overstimulating you and you just need a break, but you don't know how to get a break with them without hurting their feelings, communicate that with them. And then that shows them, too, how to communicate it with other people. And number 4, which I think is very important, is learning how to take accountability. Saying sorry and owning up to your mistakes would actually make them respect you more, not less. But I think many parents think if they apologize, that somehow they're going to lose the respect of their children. But actually, when you don't apologize, that's why you're losing the respect of your children, because sometimes your children know that you're dead wrong. And I don't know, maybe you know you're dead wrong, maybe you don't, but your children know that you're dead wrong, and they get frustrated and annoyed that you just cannot admit you're wrong. Or maybe you admit that it was wrong, but you don't want to apologize because you feel like, because once again, you feel like that's going to cause you to lose respect. But no, if you know that you've done wrong, take accountability for it. Because this also too teaches your child how to take accountability as well, which many do not know how to do. There is so much pride in not wanting to apologize. And people in general, statistically speaking, don't like to own up and apologize. So it does not surprise me that parents won't either, especially with their children. But there are so many broken relationships in family just because parents refuse to own up and apologize. Many times your child's not even mad at what happened anymore. It's the way you responded that is upsetting them. And it's actually a quick fix, but we let our pride to get in the way. I've often heard people say that I just want my parent to apologize, or I just wish my parent could see it in my way, or I just wish my parent can understand what they did wrong. And when parents are willing to do that, this will help repair the relationship, because accountability and apologizing, all of this is helpful in repairing relationships. So the same way you do these things to repair relationship with your partner, repair your relationship with your friends, it's the same thing with your children. Your children also, that's a relationship in and of itself that many times is going to need repair from any ruptures. So those are usually the ones who grow up to do well despite their circumstances. Sometimes parents say ridiculous things like, well, I did the best that I could. Well, your best caused hurt, so just apologize. And to say that it was your best, to me, I don't know, that would hurt more, because I'm just like, wow, I would never tell my child I did the best when they experienced me at my worst. Why would I even degrade myself that way? If I knew I was behaving at my worst, I would not tell my child I was doing my best. I would own up to it and say, yeah, I probably could have done better, but I didn't do better because of X, Y, and Z. More times than not, it's because people don't do their own work. And this leads me to point number 5. In order to be better for your children, you need to do your own inner work and healing. Most of the time, the reason why people can't do better for their children is because they haven't even done better for themselves. They haven't gone to therapy. They haven't gotten any type of counseling. They haven't done the inner work in themselves to better themselves and learn how to love themselves. And if you don't know how to love yourself well, you're not going to be able to love other people well. You can't teach your child to love themselves when you haven't even learned how to love yourself. You can't teach your child how to walk with resilience when you don't have resilience. You can't teach your child to deal with situations that's going to cause shame and condemnation when you're carrying around shame and condemnation. If you're a parent walking around with shame and condemnation, most likely you're going to put that on your children as well. Many people parent wrong because they were parent wrong, but they never bothered to get the healing and help for it that they needed. Then most of the time you will repeat the same mistakes because that's all you know. So in a way, I guess that is your best, but I just feel like if you know you were at your worst and you say that, I don't know, I just feel like it should click something in my mind like, nah, I should have been able to do better than that, depending on what it is. Now, these are general statements that I'm more so making. I know there could be some nuance depending on who I am speaking to, but there are some situations where it should hopefully light a bulb in your mind where you're just like, damn, this couldn't be my best. I got to do more or better for my child. And some people I do meet are like that. They know that what they grew up from, they want to do more, they want to do better for their child, but so they seek it. They seek those ways to try to do better for their children. If you want the best for your child, then you have to also want the best for yourself. Work on bettering yourself, because when you do that, it will probably also be what you need to learn to communicate with your child more efficiently and not just filled with anger and intense emotions that you have not regulated. Usually in therapy, you're learning how to emotionally regulate and learning how to communicate better. So now in parenting, you can teach your child how to emotionally regulate. You're communicating better with your child, which is now teaching your child how to communicate better as well. So I always say you cannot fully love others well if you do not know how to love yourself. If you don't love you and you are carrying around shame and low self-esteem, you will pass that on to your child, whether you are aware of it or not. You're probably teaching your kids not to love themselves because you probably don't love you. Lack of self-love will affect your relationship with your children and what you teach your children. And number 6, it's important to let your child express themselves emotionally and freely. Most parents do not know how to deal with their child's emotions because they don't even know how to deal with their own emotions. People do not learn how to emotionally regulate just with time. There are plenty of adults out there throwing tantrums, or even if it's not a tantrum necessarily, they cannot handle their emotions. And if you cannot handle yours, you cannot handle anyone else's. And when it comes to your child, it is actually your job to not only handle it, but to teach them how to regulate, especially when they're very young. And if you cannot handle your emotion, you cannot handle anyone else's. And when it comes to your child, it actually is your job to not only handle their emotions, especially when they're very young, but to teach them how to regulate. So when you work on bettering yourself, you can help your child. Better emotional regulation can lead you and your child to better resilience, knowing how to deal with the stresses of life. This will lead to better decision making because emotions affect the way that we think and causes us to not think efficiently when the emotions is heightened. So emotional regulation also teaches one how to have self-control and make better decisions. And when you can make better decisions, that can also help with your self-esteem and confidence, because some people lack confidence because they are making bad decisions, but they might be making bad decisions because they haven't emotionally regulated themselves and they're making these decisions based off of emotions. Emotions are good for information, is good for giving us understanding, but they should not be the primary driving force. Emotion regulation also teaches one how to have self-control. So lastly, I want to double down on this. Please be mindful of how you speak to your child. Not saying you have to walk on eggshells or be super gentle. I don't have much to say about gentle parenting, but some things I have heard, I'm like, some of you parents, sorry, but I have to say, can be jerks to your kids. And it's like, what do you think you're instilling in your child? But once again, usually that goes back to this person probably don't have love and respect for themselves. So of course, unfortunately, they're not going to give that to their child, and their child is going to grow up having the same issues as the parent. And sometimes it's the opposite problem. Sometimes it's not the way your parents spoke to you. Sometimes it's because they didn't. Some children grow up feeling neglected because their parents may have been around, but they never or barely ever talked to them and had a conversation with them. This will then lead to emotional neglect. And the child may think that the parent did not want to spend time with them because maybe they weren't good enough, they're not important, or something was wrong with them, or something else was more important for that parent. Because remember, young children personalize. They do not have the knowledge and wisdom yet to separate and know that their parents' behaviors has nothing to do with who they are as a person. So most of the time when their parent is behaving in a certain way, the child is going to assume that it's because of me that they're behaving this way. Often when parents get divorced when a child's very young, many times children can believe that it is their fault that the parents are getting divorced. And sometimes this is what leads to perfectionism and people-pleasing behaviors, because there's a belief that gets created that if I behave a certain way, if I do a certain thing, then I can make my parent happy and it's going to change the outcome or make a better outcome for the family. But however, many of these things are usually out of the child's control. But once again, the child does not know that. They personalize. So it's important for you to also speak to your children, because sometimes parents might not realize how them not interacting very much is also still having a negative effect on the child. So whether you are not talking to your child, or maybe you are, but it's always negative, this can make the child latch on and have negative identity beliefs created in their mind. You want to keep your child from keep thinking that it is their job to keep mom and dad happy, that if she is not happy, then it is my fault. Let your child know that your behaviors, feelings, and emotions are not always caused by what they do or didn't do. Going back to numbers 1 through 7, if you're having more destructive criticism and not constructive criticism with your child, then of course your child's going to grow up with low self-esteem, self-hatred, because they're attaching these negative criticisms to themselves. And when you forget what it's like to be a child, this affects the way you talk to your child. When you don't have boundaries, this is teaching your child not to respect themselves. When you refuse to apologize, you are teaching your child not to take accountability and how not to own up to certain things, which also will affect the way that they interact with other people, which can also affect their self-esteem and their confidence in the world. If you're not giving constructive criticism, but just destructive criticism, this is definitely going to affect your child's ability to love themselves. They're going to carry the shame, and they're going to carry hatred towards themselves. They've often heard words that just destroyed them and didn't build them up. I think I've heard, this might have been a movie, but I've heard some people say sometimes like, well, I got to be harsh to them because life is going to be harsh to them. It's like, no, you should be a safe space for them because life is going to be hard for them. And when you are a safe space for them, then you allow them to have that space, properly deal with the stresses of life, to have a space where they can actually emotionally regulate. If they're going from one harsh environment to the next harsh environment, the brain is constantly going to be in a heightened state of fear, of anxiety, that is going to make it harder for them to regulate their emotions. It's going to make it harder for them to learn how to adapt and be resilient in these situations. So no, being harsh to your child is not going to teach them to deal with a harsh world. You need to be a safe space for them so that they can learn how to deal with the stresses of the world, have that space where they can decompress, process what it is that they're experiencing in the world so that they can go out and be better. Not being constantly in this high stressful situation because everywhere they go, they're dealing with harshness. Also, forgetting what it's like to be a child is just a way I think that is helpful for us to know how to show empathy, to be that safe space for your children so that they can learn how to have resilience, they can learn how to grow emotionally well, so that they can build up better self-esteem about themselves, speaking life to them. So not only giving constructive criticism, but speak life to your children. Give them compliments, let them know how well they're doing, help them to feel encouraged and to feel motivated. The words that you say to your child really can make or break them, because the things that you say to your child is going to become their inner voice. Many times the thoughts that we have in our minds, even you, just think now, certain things that you probably criticize yourself about or you say about yourself, that's a negative label. More times than not, you'll find either a parent or another adult that was in your life that talked to you in that way or called you this thing, and now you're saying it to yourself. Because all the voices that we have when we are younger become our own inner voice. And then we think it's us talking to ourselves, but we have to ask ourselves that question, like, no, who told me this? Whose voice is this that's in my head? Because we had it for so long, we identify with it. But we have to separate ourselves from these. Well, first you have to know that this is not your own original thought, that this is a thought that was planted in you when you was a child, so that you could separate yourself from it and no longer identify with it. And when you no longer identify with it, that can then lead you to free yourself from the lies that it's telling you and the way that it's affecting your life and the way that you're showing up in the world. Boundaries are also very important when it comes to learning self-respect. Learning self-respect can help with confidence and self-esteem and also resilience and being able to teach your child how to take accountability, you taking accountability, because this also helps with relationships. And when your child can learn how to deal with relationships and conflict with you and learn how to repair relationships with you, then that's going to mimic in other areas of their life. But most of the time, we don't learn how to deal with conflict. So we don't know how to teach our children how to deal with conflict. And then, of course, they grow up not knowing how to deal with conflict. And then they teach their children not knowing how to deal with conflict. Expression, I think, is also very important when it comes to teaching your child resilience. More times than not, we think that if we let our children cry, that's going to make them weak. A lot of times, young boys are not given the space to express their emotions. So then they grow up learning how to suppress it and to numb it, and believing that the world cannot handle it. They don't have the space to express it. And unfortunately, sometimes they might fall into romantic relationships that do the same. But sometimes men just automatically just assume that in multiple romantic relationships, and sometimes don't even give the partner the chance to be that safe space for them. Unfortunately, especially with young boys, they are not given the space to express their emotions and to get it out. And then we wonder why we have so many angry men walking around the world. And I think it's very important, especially for our young boys, to be able to have that space to learn how to regulate their emotions, to learn how to express any and every emotions that they have, and knowing that being sad is not a sign of weakness, and being angry is something that should be controlled, because anger is the one emotion that most people think is acceptable, especially for men. So these are just some things that I've noticed so far and I've learned so far that I think that parents can do and pay attention to help their child to grow up to love themselves, to have boundaries, to have self-respect, self-esteem, and to have resilience. I hope this was helpful for you and have you thinking more about being intentional with your parenting. And if you are a parent, let me know what you think. Are some of these things you do or try to do that you notice made a difference? Are some of these things that you feel like is just, I don't know, impossible to do? Whatever it is that you think, I would love to hear what you have to say in the comments. And remember to like, subscribe, and until next time, take care.